Shalom, shalom. Shalom, everyone. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure that I'm on and I am broadcasting live. Shalom, shalom. Okay, there we go. I have volume. I'm trying to see, for some reason, as Facebook always does sometimes, I'm not able to tag certain people. So let me see if it'll allow me to tag now. Probably would now that I'm trying to stream live. Don't be stressing on how long it takes me. And I still can't tag nobody. Sorry y'all, Facebook is not letting me tag today. So try to go back in one more time, and if it don't let me tag, I'm gonna still rock and roll anyway. Okay, I still can't tag, so it's gonna be online, so hopefully the people that need to listen will listen on anyway. And this will be a response, actually, to my full preterist brethren out there. Oh, sorry about that. I apologize. Sorry about all that. Here we go. Shalom, shalom, brother. And I'm finna, this will be a response to, and share the video if you could, brother. This will be a response to some of my full preterist brother. This is Elvin Israel from RPK, Resurrection, Prophecy, and Kingdom, where we concentrate on Resurrection, Prophecy, and Kingdom. You also can look me up at AOSD, Chandler, Assembly of Sound Doctrine, Chandler. I'm just trying to get that all out the way so I can start, because this is going to be kind of lengthy. So I want to just get the information out, and whenever you have time, go back and review it. You know, some of the lessons be long, so you can review it in segments. But I think this information is very important, because so we can have the proper foundation when we tackle scripture. So the problem we have is that a lot of individuals, right, when we go into Torah, when we go into the story of Adam and Eve, we have the sense, because we have, like, we can read the genealogy and all that stuff. We get caught up in the words, and we get caught up in the literature instead of what the Hebrews was getting from it. So here at RPK, we call ourselves fuller preterists, because we try to give you back what the Hebrews was thinking about it and their understanding, and we feel like we're descendants of them, so it should be our understanding also, so we can actually understand and know and how to perceive this ancient information and how to use it to transform our lives today. But we get lost, a lot of our brothers and sisters get lost in the language, trying to make everything literal. And, you know, I don't want to blame the Gentile Christians for this, but I think they can take a lot of that heat, because the things that they did with the scriptures is uncanny, and now we're trying to just correct it. So some of these things, you can't go inside of the Bible. You can't go inside of the 66 or the 88 books to get this information. That doesn't tell you the idioms. The Bible doesn't tell you the culture. The Bible was written to individuals who already understood the culture, that was living in the culture. They did not have to get it broke down, every single idiom and metaphor, because they understood it. And the things that they did not understand through speech, not written in the Bible, through just the community. Just like we work in our community, we don't write down everything our neighbors tell us, and so forth and so on. They had different ways in order to explain to each other what actually is meant, because you got to remember, the Most High was in fact their only principle. He was their only modes and mean of living. Today, sorry about that, y'all. Today, we have a lot going on. You know, we have our family, friends, we got our jobs. You know, we're trying to make sure that we're making it in the world, not struggling or stressing. We're worried about our own individual needs. Well, back then, the people who followed the Most High, that same energy, they was putting it on the Most High and the Most High only. They wasn't putting it on anybody else except the Most High. So the only things that they had in order to understand the Most High at the time was the Torah and the Tanakh, and eventually the gospel when it was spread. So we're going to go to the Torah and the Tanakh and, you know, the gospels and etc. to explain to you guys what's going on in the first century and the century before that, so you can understand what's going on in the Bible. But how do you get the cultural information? How do you get the backing? How do you get that understanding if the KJV or the Septuagint is not going to explain to you these idioms and metaphors? How do you get it? Well, you can look at the commentaries that's left by the ancients. Well, I'll have Josephus, who was a first century priest. I also have Philo, who was a first century Jew, who also was a philosopher, very important in his time and era, who knew a lot of the breakdowns, right? And then we also, I also have the Targums, but I guess I took the Targums away and left them in my room, and I have some of the church fathers, but mainly don't look at them except to make sure they're going with what the Jews are saying. But today we're going to dive into Josephus and Philo first, so we can understand the background. And once we understand the background of what's being said, then we can apply it appropriately with the Bible. And we're going to find out if Adam and Eve is figurative or literal. So first thing first, let's go to the priest. Now, we're not going to worry about the whitewashed image. We're going to listen to the words, because we know that the Greeks and Romans, they had a knack of whitewashing and turning everything to fit their paradigm, but they can't do away with this Hebraic information, right? So we're going to use the Hebraic information that was left on the record in document form and translated into English for a better, clearer understanding that we can understand. And let's see what's said here. So now we're going to start off in the preface of Josephus, right? And I have my notes just in case you want to know what I'm looking at, because I have plenty of points that I want to hit. All right, I'm going to start on page 31. I'm going to start around line... I want to start at line 14. It says, upon the whole, a band that will peruse this history may principally learn from it, and all the events succeed well, even into the incredible degree, and the renewed of the felicity is proposed by God. But then it is to those that follow his will and do not venture to break his excellent law. So Josephus is saying, sorry about that. Josephus is saying exactly why he created these books, right? Why he left this book, this information. Now, let me keep reading. I was at line 14. And that so far by as men, as any way apostatized from the accurate observation of them, which is the law, what was practicable before become impracticable. And whatsoever they set about as a good thing is converted into incurable calamity. Sorry about that, y'all. My phone keeps going off. And now I exhort all those that pursue these books to apply their minds to God. So now, what Josephus was saying was, I'm finna write something, and I want you to read the things that's saying, but I want you to think about the Most High while you are reading the history of my people. Think about their God while you're reading the history of my people. So now, and once again, I believe we're descendants from those people. So I want to start at line 18 now. It says, but because now remember, Josephus wrote this about 2,000 years ago. It says, but because almost all our Constitution depends on the wisdom of Moses. So this is very important to understand when you're reading Torah. Torah was back off of the wisdom of Moses. Now, where did Moses learn from? He learned from the Egyptians. He grew up in the house of the Pharaoh. Philo let it be known that he had access to so many brains of that time, so many quote-unquote philosophers of the time, from the Persians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Egyptians, and etc. All of those wise men coming inside of the king court and teaching those inside of their court, including Moses. And it said that Moses was so smart that he advanced in all of the information in his toddler/preteen years. So by the time he was an older teenager, all the way into the adulthood, he had already surpassed everybody in understanding. This is why Moses was very intelligent. This is why I'm pretty sure the Most High chose Moses as a redeemer, or as a one to begin the covenant with, to bring it to the people. He chose someone smart. But because almost all of our Constitution depends on the wisdom of Moses, our legislator, I cannot avoid saying somewhat concerning him beforehand, though I shall do it briefly. I mean, because otherwise, those that read my book. So now, this is Josephus, right? This is the things of Josephus, Antiquity of the Jews, War of the Jews. So now listen to what he says. I cannot avoid saying somewhat concerning him beforehand, though I shall do it briefly. I mean, because otherwise, those that read my book may wonder how it come to pass that my discourse, which promises an account of laws and historical facts. So Josephus said that I'm writing things of laws and historical facts. But what happened? How it comes to pass that my discourse, which promises an account of laws and historical facts, contains so much of philosophy. So he's saying that the people who's reading his works about the Jews, about the Israelites, they're going to wonder, I thought this is going to be a book of laws and historical facts. Why is it so much philosophical information inside of the children of Israel? I'm trying to find out about the children of Israel, but the way that everything is being phrased is more like a philosophy. So let's keep reading. The reader is therefore to know that Moses deemed it exceeding necessary that he who would conduct his own life well and give laws to others in the first place should consider the divine nature, and upon the contemplation of God's operations should thereby imitate the best of all patterns, so far as it is possible for human nature to do, and to endeavor to follow after it. So Moses said, I'm going to do the things that the Most High want me to do. So I'm going to create a pattern. This is what he did in the Torah. He created a pattern in order for people to imitate the will of the Most High. Not for the people to take literal, but for people to use it as a means to imitate the will of the Most High. Which means you're reading the words, but the words mean something else. So let's keep reading. Imitate the best of all patterns. Neither could the legislator himself have a right mind without such a contemplation. Nor would anything he should write tend to the promotion of the virtue in his readers. I mean, unless they be taught first of all that God is the Father and Lord of all things, and sees all things, and that thence he bestows a happy life upon those that follow him. So now, one of the things that Josephus said, Moses was trying to give Israel. Remember, Moses created the Torah. One of the points of the Torah, or the main point of the Torah, what he started with first, he was trying to teach them that God is the Father and Lord of all things. So that's one thing, the point of the Torah, is to point everybody to the Father. And that this he bestows a happy life upon those that follow him. So notice, even though Israel was the chosen people, the point was to show the Lord was God over all. Not just Israel, over all. And that for everyone that follow him, he gives them a happy life. That was the point of Torah. Okay, so now let's keep reading. But plunges such as do not walk in the paths of virtue into inevitable miseries. So now, what lesson was taught that God was the Father of all? He gave a happy life. He gave a happy life to those that follow him, and he plunged those into miseries that walked away from him. Where was that showed at? None other than the story of Adam and Eve. But let's keep going. Now, when Moses was desirous to teach this lesson to his countrymen. So what lesson was Moses trying to teach to his countrymen? To the Israelites. They be taught first of God, and that he's the Father and Lord of all things, and sees all things, and bestows a happy life upon those that follow him, and plunges those into inevitable miseries that walk away from the paths of virtue. Those are the lessons that Moses was trying to teach his countrymen. But look, he did not begin the establishment of laws after the same manner that other legislators did. I mean, upon contracts and other rights between one man and another, but by raising their minds upward to regard God and his creation of the world, and by persuading them that we men are the most excellent of the creatures of God upon earth. So, what was Moses doing? He was trying to raise the children of Israel's mind upwards regarding the Most High. The Torah, the point of the Torah was to raise people's mind upward regarding the Most High. Not fringes, not eating pork, not Sabbath day, not none of this stuff that you guys are teaching. The point was, and this is coming from a Jew, a priest that lived back then 2,000 years ago. The point was to raise people's mind upwards. So when you're reading stories like Adam and Eve, or if you're reading what happened to Noah, when you're reading about Enoch, when you're reading about Abraham, when you're reading about Isaac, Jacob, when you're reading about all of the things in Torah, understand that Moses is trying to raise the people's minds upward toward the Most High. He's doing it in story form. Okay, so let's keep reading. Let's go down to line 24. I exhort, therefore, my readers to examine this whole undertaking in that view, for thereby it would appear to them that there is nothing therein disagreeable either to the majesty of God or to his love to mankind. Remember, Most High loves mankind. For all things have here a reference to the nature of the universe, while our legislator, that's Moses, speaks some things wisely, but enigmatically. Now, what does enigmatic mean? Difficult to understand or interpret. So even though you're reading the words in English, even though you think that you have a great understanding and you're trying to take all of these things literal, this happened literal in the Torah, that happened literal in the Torah, literal, the priest is telling you some things are difficult to understand and interpret, and other things under a decent allegory. So he's telling you some things in the Torah are hard to interpret. Other things in the Torah are allegorical. Once again, other things in the Torah are allegorical, but still explain such things as required. A direct explication means analyzing, the process of analyzing or developing an ideal plainly and expressively. So some things was hard to understand, other things was allegorical, and some things Moses explained straight up right. However, those that have a mind to know the reason of everything may find here a very curious philosophical theory, which I now indeed shall waive the explication of, but if God afford me the time to it, I will set about writing it after I have finished the present work. So Josephus would let it be known, if you guys want to really know the meaning, the deeper meaning behind all of the things that's going on in the history of Israel, if you want to know those deeper meanings, after I'm done with this, I'm going to write more works that explain to you those deeper meanings. So if everything was taken literal, if everything was at face value, why would Josephus offer or say that after this is over with, I'm going to create another works in order to explain all of this information that you're reading? Because you're taking it literal. But because remember, this was written to the Greeks to help the Greeks understand what was going on with the Hebrews. So he was saying that, but he never got around to doing it. Nobody found the work, but that's why we have Philo. But anyway, he said, I shall now betake myself to the history before me, after I have first mentioned what Moses says of the creation of the world, which I find described in the sacred books after the manner following. So now he said Moses touches on the creation of the world, right? So now I want to go down. This is book 1, chapter 1, verse 34, or line 34. He says, moreover, Moses, after the 7th day was over, begins to talk philosophically. So now, let me go into my Septuagint, right? Let me go into my Septuagint. So this would be Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and 1. Thus heaven and earth and all their adornment was finished, and on the 7th day God finished the works he made, and he rested on the 7th day from all the works he made. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his works God began to make. This is the book of the Genesis of heaven and earth, when they were made in the day the Lord made heaven and earth. Right? So now, that's the 7th day. Then, according to Josephus the priest, after the 7th day, Moses began to talk philosophically. So who is brought up after the 7th day in the Torah? Genesis 2 and 5, before any plant on the field on the earth, for God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground, but a fountain came up from the ground and watered the whole face of the earth. Then God formed man out of the dust from the ground and breathed in his face the breath of life. Then man became a living soul. Then you got the tree of the knowledge, a tree of life, of good and evil. You got all that introduced. You have Adam introduced. You have Eve introduced. You have the serpent introduced. You have the cherub introduced. So you have all of these things being introduced after the 7th day. But according to Josephus, who was a 1st century Jew who understood this stuff, this is when Moses began to talk philosophically. This is when Moses started talking literal and he entered into his enigmatic language, his allegorical language. This is when Moses finally begins to use philosophy. And and concerning I'm going to read exactly what he's saying. Moreover, Moses, after the 7th day was over, begins to talk philosophically. And concerning the formation of man, says thus, that God took dust from the ground and formed man and inserted in him a spirit and a soul. This man was called Adam, which is of the Hebrew tongue, ones that is red, because he was formed out of the red earth, compounded together for the kind of virgin and true earth. So now, it's saying that this is a philosophy that Moses is speaking. Adam is introduced, but Adam is being introduced dealing when Moses started bringing philosophy inside of Torah. So now, we have Josephus, who plainly said Moses spoke in enigmatic language. Moses spoke in allegorical language. Some things was wise, other things was hard to understand, but he explained the things that he thought he needed to explain. So you have Moses speaking in an allegorical language, and then we have Josephus once again saying when Adam is brought up, it's under the banner of philosophy. So now, let's leave Josephus now, and let's go into somebody who gets more into detail. Because don't forget, Josephus said in a later work, he was going to explain what all this stuff meant, which he did not get to make that work. But we have Philo, who was I believe he lived 20 BC to like maybe 40 AD, something like that. So we have Philo, 1st century. He was an Alexandrian Jew from Egypt. Alexandria at that time was the community that had all of the information, that had all of the philosophy, that had all of the wisdom from all corners, pretty much where Moses would have got his understanding from something like a similar guise, under a similar banner. But now, let's go to Philo now, right? Philo, philosopher. So once again, we're trying to see, hey, how you doing, brothers? Share the video if you can. Once again, we're trying to see if Adam was figurative or literal, okay? Because people want him to be literal. They want to say that, because there's a genealogical reference to those that came after Adam, that meant that all of this stuff, he had to be a real person, and etc. Because why would he have genealogies after him? I believe we forget that the Hebrews were great storytellers, and if you tell a story, you just can't leave it open-ended. You got to keep on with the story until it reaches livelihood or something that you could compare to, something you can see. Because this was all this was all before Moses' time anyway. So he wouldn't have been around for none of this. But let's keep going. We're going to go to Philo on creation, right? I'm going to start on page 5, line 25. And I'm going to read exactly what Philo says. Now, you can take it or you can leave it. But this is what Philo said. This is the doctrine of Moses, not mine. Accordingly, he, when recording the creation of man in words which follows, asserts expressly that he was made in the image of God. Okay, so we got Philo saying, the things I'm telling you, this is not my doctrine. This is Moses' doctrine. Okay, so don't hit him with the questions. This is what Moses was bringing out. So I want to go to page 10 on creation. I want to start at line 65. It says, and after all, he made man. But how he made him, I will mention presently. After I have first explained that he adopted the most beautiful connection and train of consequences according to the system of the creation of animals, which he had sketched out to himself, for the souls of the most sluggish and most weakly form has been allotted to the race of fishes and etc. So I hit that to show you now. He's going to start talking about the formation of man, right? So now we're going to go to page 11. We're going to start at line 75. We're going to read down to line 76. It is on this account that Moses says, at the creation of man alone, that God said, let us make man, which expression shows an assumption of other beings to himself as assistants, which it does, in order that God, the governor of all things, may have all the blameless intentions and actions of man when he did right attributed to him, and that his other assistants might bear the imputations of his contrary actions. For it was fitting that the father should, in the eyes of his children, be free from all imputation of evil and vice and energy in accordance with vice or evil. And very beautifully, after he had called the whole race man. So now, the whole race was man. Did he distinguish between sexes, saying that they were created male and female, although all the individuals of the race had not yet assumed their distinctive forms, since the extreme species are contained in the genus and are beheld as in a mirror, but those who are able to discern acutely. Okay, so now I know I'm just saying words. All of this might be rolling off. You don't understand what's going on. But just stay with me, stick with me, and all of this is going to start making sense. So I want to go down to page 19 now. And I'm going to read 134 through 136. And it says, after this, Moses says that God made man, having taken clay from the earth, and he breathed in his face the breath of life. And don't forget, y'all, Moses was a philosopher, right? He was talking philosophically. So if you want to know what the philosophy behind what Moses was saying is, you have to listen up to a philosopher that's a Jew trying to explain to you the philosophy that Moses was using when he was speaking of what happened in Genesis, right? And we know that Josephus said this happened after day 7. But Philo is trying to bring it back a little bit more to bring it all in to show you, okay, this is what's said on day 6, but we're going to show you how this interacts with what goes on day 7. So he's just showing you the back and forth. And this, Moses says that God made man, having taken clay from the earth and breathed in his face the breath of life. And by this expression, he shows most clearly that there is a vast difference between man as generated now and the first man who was made according to the image of God. For man as formed now is perceptible to the external senses, partaking of qualities consisting of body and soul, man or woman by nature mortal. But man made according to the image of God was an ideal or a genus or a seal, perceptible only by the intellect, incorporeal, neither male nor female, imperishable by nature. So he said that mankind beginning off, pretty much this is philosophy, begin off a regular shaped creature made with clay. But the breath of life entered into him, and that is a different type of man. So you got one type of man and you got another type of man, okay? But he asserts the formation of the individual man, perceptible by the eternal senses in the composition of earthly substance and divine spirit. But that the body was created by the Creator, taking a lump of clay and fashioning the human form out of it. But that the soul proceeds from no created thing at all, but from the Father and ruler of all things. For when he uses the expression, he breathed into, he means nothing else than the divine spirit proceeding from the happy and blessed nature sent to take up its habitation here on earth, for the advantage of our race, in order that every man is mortal according to that portion of him which is visible. Remember the things that you can see, but there's something going on inside which you cannot see. he may at all events be immortal according to the portion which is invisible. So the outside, your flesh, mortal, inside, immortal. And for this reason, one may properly say that man is on the boundaries of a better and an immortal nature, partaking of each as far as it necessary for him, that he was born at the same time, both mortal and the immortal. Mortal as to his body, but immortal as to his intellect. So his outward body, mortal. What's going on the inside, his mind, immortal. Outside, corruptible. Inside, incorruptible. But the original man, he who was created out of clay, the primeval founder of all our race, appears to me, so this is his opinion, to have been most excellent in both particulars, in both soul and body, and to have been very far superior to all the men of subsequent ages from his preeminent excellence in both parts. For he is in truth was really good and perfect, and one may form a conjecture of the perfection of his bodily beauty from three considerations. The first, which is, when the earth was now but lately formed by its separation from the abundant quantity of water. I'm not going to read all of that. So let's go to now page 20, and I'm going to read 140, line 140. And then we're going to see what all of this means and where we're going with all of that. The first man, therefore, appears to me, another opinion, to have been such both in his body and in his soul, being far superior to all those who live in the present day, and to all those who have been gone before us. For our generation has been from men, but he was created by God, and in that same proportion as one author of being is superior to the other, so too is the being that is produced. So he was saying that the first man was way beautiful, more strong, had more going on in the state of perfection, because he was made straight from the Most High, and everybody that came from that man was least in all of those characteristics, right? So now, you see that he's talking about a man, right? He got it there, a man, and then here people go. See, right there. Man right there, man made, first man right there made, that's Adam. That proves that Adam is the first man. That proves that Adam is something to be taken literal, not figurative. Well, let's see. He's talking about on the creation, right? So he's going through the creation of things. So now, let's go to his allegorical interpretations now. So now, he's going to go through the allegorical interpretation. Sorry about that, y'all. Now, allegorical interpretation. Don't forget. Let me quote. Let me quote Josephus again. Sorry, I got it right here on the floor. Let me quote Josephus again, just in case you guys forgot. Why do we need to read an allegorical interpretation from Philo, who was a Jew? Because according to Josephus, who was a Jew and a priest, while our legislator, who was Moses, speaks some things wisely, but enigmatically, and others under a decent allegory. So, according to Josephus, the priest, Moses spoke things under a decent allegory. According to Philo, who was a Jew, he's going to explain to you the allegorical things that Moses spoke of. I mean, they work hand in hand. Both of them are saying the same thing. If you want to take it literal, that's on you. But I'm just telling you, here at RPK, we call ourselves full of preterists because we believe the Jews, and we look at it from the Jew perspective, and then we see how we can use it with the scriptures. Because if you don't know the history, if you don't know the culture, then you're just lost and you're making stuff up. So now, let's go here. Okay, so we're at the Philo allegorical interpretations. We're going to be on page 28. We'll start at line 31 under Roman numeral 12. And God created man, taking a lump of clay from the earth and breathed into his face the breath of life. And man become a living soul. The races of men are twofold. So now you got to understand what's going on here, because I know you guys don't want to listen to it. You guys don't want to believe it. But in the New Testament, it's full of philosophy, and they all are saying the same thing, just different ways. So see if this sounds familiar to you that could be found in the New Testament. For there are two races of men, or the races of men are twofold. For one is the heavenly man, and the other is the earthly man. So when you was talking about, when Paul was explaining Christ, he said it was two Adams, right? One Adam was a living soul. The other Adam was a heavenly spirit, right? Now we have two folds. We have an earthly man and a heavenly man. See, they all, Paul, Philo, they all lived in the same era, okay? They all lived in the same generation. As being born in the image of God, has no participation in any corruptible or earth-like essence. So now look, has no participation in any corruptible or earth-like essence. So what did Paul say? When this corruptible put on incorruption. What was the corruptible? The earth-like essence, the things that was going on in the earth, the earthly. Well, let's keep reading and you will see. But the earthly man is made of loose material, which he calls a lump of clay, on which account he says, not that the heavenly man was made, but that he was fashioned according to the image of God. But the earthly man he calls a thing made. And you remember, Christ is in the image of his Father. The heavenly man is in the image of God. Christ in the image of his Father. All of this is first century philosophy, even though you guys might not want to believe it. But the earthly man he calls a thing made and not begotten by the Maker. And we must consider that the man who was formed of earth means the mind which is to be infused into the body. Let me say that again, and let me go ahead and underline that. Let me go ahead and underline that, because that's going to come up again. And we must consider that the man who was formed of the earth means the mind which is to be infused into the body. One more time for the people who did not catch it, for the people who did not hear it. And we must consider that the man who was formed of earth means, okay, so we're talking about philosophy now. We're using philosophical information, a philosophical manner now. We're not talking about literalism no more. We're using figurative language now. And we must consider that the man who was formed of the earth means, so what does that mean? The mind, which is to be infused into the body, but which has not yet been so infused. And this mind would be really earthly and corruptible. So what is corruptible? A mind that's earthly, a mind that's set on earthly stuff. Remember, this corruptible must put on incorruption. If you are not in the culture, you don't. What's Paul talking about? You got people thinking out here that he's saying that this corruptible is the flesh, and this flesh must be shed, and then they're going to put on incorruptible, a new type of flesh, and that flesh is going to be like X-Man and Superman and maybe superpowers and all that stuff. But the first century understanding in the philosophical nature dealt with the mind and how people viewed things. And we're going to show you that in the New Testament. But which has not been infused, and this mind would be really earthly and corruptible, if it were not that God had breathed into it the spirit of genuine life. So when God took that earthly mind, he breathed into that earthly mind life, the genuine life. For then it exists and is no longer made into a soul, and this soul is not inactive and incapable of proper information, but a really intellectual and living one. For man, says Moses, became a living soul. So now, we're looking at some of the philosophical nature that's going on. So now, let's keep going on. I'm just going to throw this little tidbit in here at verse 45, line 45. God therefore sows and implants terrestrial virtue in the human race, being an imitation and representation of the heavenly virtue. So remember, Moses, Josephus let it be known when Moses was writing, when Moses was doing the Torah, he was using a pattern to explain to the people what the Most High was like, the Most High's characteristic, what pleases the Most High. He was using a pattern, not for you to be taken literal. He wasn't talking about you literally not eating pork and all that stuff. That's not what Moses was concentrating on. The thing dealing with the fringes, the remembering of the commandments and stuff, that had deeper meanings, the Sabbath day, that had deeper meanings. He was using these things as a pattern in order to explain what the Most High wanted civilization or mankind to know. But let's keep reading. For pitying our race and seeing that it is exposed to abundant and innumerable evils. Remember, in Genesis, mankind is evil, naturally evil from birth. He firmly planted terrestrial virtue as an assistant against the ward off of the disease of the soul, being, as I have said before, an imitation of the heavenly and archetypical wisdom, which he calls by various names. Now, virtue is called a paradise metaphorically, and the appropriate place for the paradise is Eden. So the paradise inside of Eden was just a metaphor for virtue. Once again, the paradise. Remember, let me quote Josephus on what Moses was saying again. We're finna get this. You're gonna get this understanding today. Our legislator speaks some things wisely, but enigmatically. Enigmatic means difficult to understand or interpret. Enigmatically. And other things under a decent allegory. So we got them they telling you not to take not to take everything that Moses was saying at face value, because Moses, who learned from the Egyptians, very allegorical people, may I add, Moses, who learned from the Egyptians, who also learned from the Grecians, the Persians, and Babylon, and etc., the Chaldees, and all of them. Moses was speaking a lot of things and he was very smart. So he didn't take all of his intelligence away. He was speaking all things in like that allegorical information, or the allegorical form, the philosophical form, which people of intelligence of the old days did. So now virtue is called a paradise metaphorically. So now let's go to line 53 now, right? Let me see if I got it marked down. I do not have it marked down, so do I need to go over it? Let me just touch it real fast. 53. And the man who had formed Moses, God placed. Let's see here. Yes, let's read 53. And the man. I don't even know why I didn't write it down, because it's very important to know. But anyway, and the man whom he had formed, Moses said, God placed in the paradise for the present only. Who then is he in reference to? He who subsequently says that the Lord God took the man whom he had formed and placed him into the paradise to cultivate it and to guard it. Must not this man, who was created according to the image and idea of God, have been a different man from the other, so that two men must have been introduced into the paradise together? So now we have two men in the paradise together. Which one of these are Adam if we take it literal? Which one of these men is going to be Adam if we're making this literal? But let's keep reading. Let's go into the philosophical nature. Therefore, so two men must have been introduced into the paradise together, the one a fictitious man, and the other modeled after the image of God. Therefore, the man modeled after the idea of God is perceived not only amid the planet, the planet of virtues, but besides this, he is the cultivator and guardian. That is to say, he is mindful of the things which he heard and practiced. But the man who is factitious neither cultivates the virtue nor guards them, but is only introduced into opinions by the abundant liberty of God, being on point of immediately becoming an exile from virtue. So he said two different type of men entered into the garden. One man that was willing to do the virtuous thing, the other man that was wanting to be selfish and only worried about himself, in other words. Therefore he calls the man who he only places in paradise factitious, but him who appoints to be his cultivator and garden he calls not factitious, but the man whom he had made. And him who he takes, but the other he casts out. And him whom he takes, he thinks worthy of three things, which is goodness of nature, especially consists, namely, expertness, perseverance, and memory. Now, expertness in the position of in paradise, in his position in paradise, memory is the guardian and preservation of holy opinions, perseverance in the affecting of what is good and the performance of virtuous actions. But the factitious mind neither remembers what is good, nor does it, but is only expert and nothing more, on which account after it has been placed in paradise, in a short time afterwards, it runs away and is cast out. So now, the man that enter into, don't forget, the paradise is metaphorical for virtue. So the man that enter into this virtue that was given by the Most High, right? It was two different type of men. One man does the will of the Most High, and the Most High embraces him. The other man does not the will of the Most High. He's an expert. He knows what to do, but he doesn't apply it. He knows the law, but he doesn't do it. He knows the commandments. He doesn't do them. He knows what's right. He doesn't do what's right. Do we see what Moses is trying to teach the children of Israel? Not the literal people, but he's trying to teach them a different plan. But let's keep reading. Once you go down to line 59. But the tree of life, that is most general virtue, which some people call goodness, from which the particular virtues are derived in which they are composed. So we have the tree of life actually being virtue. It actually stands for general virtue. It stands for goodness. So the tree of life that they was partaking of was them being good, them being virtuous, right? But let me read down further. But we as has been said before, affirm that the tree of life is meant the most general virtue. So the tree of life once again stands for virtue. So I'm gonna skip down. When therefore that receives the impression of perfect virtue. So when a person has perfect virtue in the sight of the Most High, it has become the tree of life. But when it has received the impression of vice, it has then become the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And vice and all evil have been banished from the divine company. So when a person does wicked, right? When a person has knowledge of the Most High and then that person does wicked, he leaves the company. The Most High turns his face away from him. He takes steps away from the divine company. He leaves out of the Garden of Eden. He leaves out of the virtue, right? So now, let's keep going. Let's go to 35 now. This is going to get to the nitty gritty, and then we're going to combine this with I see what's going on. I'm looking at my wrong notes. Definitely looking at my wrong notes. But let's keep going on. Page 35. I was wondering what was going on, but I got it now. We're going to start at line 88, right? So look, once again, we're trying to find out if Adam is figurative or literal. So now, line 88, page 35. And the Lord God took the man whom he had made and placed him in the paradise to cultivate and to guard it. The man who God made differs from the factitious man. So if people want to know, okay, what is this factitious word? It means artificially created. So someone that was artificially created by a method, right? Artificial method. The man whom God made differs from the factitious man, as I have said before. For the factitious mind is somewhat earthly, but the created mind is purer and more immaterial. So now notice we went from man to mind, right? From man to mind. This is going to be very important. But the created mind is purer and more immaterial, having no participation in any perishable matter, but having received a purer and more simple constitution. Accordingly, God takes this pure mind, not permitting it to proceed out of itself, and after he has taken it, he places it among the virtues which are firmly rooted and budding well, that it may cultivate and guard them. For many men who were originally practicers of virtue, when they come to the end, fall off. Remember in the New Testament, he that endured to the end will be saved. This is all philosophical information. For men who started off practicing in virtue, this is what was going on in the New Testament. They started off in the truth, and then they went over back into their vice, and they start leading others astray, and etc. When they come to the end, fall off. But he to whom God gives lasting knowledge is also endowed by him with both qualities, namely with the disposition to cultivate the virtues, and the resolution never to desert them. But always to minister to and guard every one of them. So Moses here uses the expression cultivate as equivalent to act, in the word guard instead of remember. And the Lord commanded Adam, saying, of every tree in the, remember, this is Adam now, right? We want Adam to be literal. So let's keep reading. And the Lord God commanded Adam, saying, of every tree that is in the paradise, thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil ye shall not eat. But in the day in which you eat of it, ye shall die the death. A question may arise here. To what kind of Adam he gave this command, and who this Adam was? So now, what that mean, what kind of Adam, and who this Adam was? I thought Adam was the first person created. So what do we mean, what kind of Adam, if Adam, proper name Adam, was a being, and he was the first man ever created to walk? What do you mean, what kind of Adam? It's only one Adam there, right? If we take Adam literal, it's only one Adam. So here we go. For Moses has not made any mention of him before, but now is the first time that he has named him. Are we then to think that he is desirous to supply you with the name of the factitious man? And he calls him, continues Moses, earth. For this is the interpretation of the name Adam. Accordingly, when you hear the name Adam, you must think that he is an earthly and perishable being. For he is made according to an image, but being not earthly, but heavenly. But we must inquire how it was after he had given names to all the other animals, he did not give one also to himself. What then are we to say about this? The mind, which is in each of us, is able to comprehend all other things, but has not the capability to understand itself. Let me run that back to you for you to get it, because just in case you didn't understand what was just said there. The Adam named everything except himself. Moses said he was Adam. Adam didn't name himself Adam. Now, he's going to explain, Josephus the philosopher is going to explain what's going on here. What then are we to say about this? The mind, which is in each of us, is able to comprehend all other things, but has not the capability of understanding itself. So he's letting it be known that Adam was actually the mind. And just like Adam did not name himself, but everything around him, the mind comprehends everything, but not itself. You ask somebody, what is a mind? What is your mind? Tell me all you know about your mind. What are the ins and outs about your mind? How does your mind look? What does your mind say? When is your mind sleeping? What is your mind working? You can't explain it, but you can explain the faults of other people. You can explain how they behave and how they act when it seems like their mind is resting on, when their mind is going on, but you can't really do it with yourself. But let's keep going on. For as the eye see all other things, but cannot see itself, but so also the mind perceives the nature of other things, but cannot understand itself. For if it does, let it tell us what it is, or what kind of thing it is, whether it is spirit, or blood, or fire, or air, or any other substance, or even only so much whether it is a substance at all, or something incorporeal. Incorporeal. Are not those men then simply who speculate on the essence of God? For how can they who are ignorant of the nature of the essence of their own soul have any accurate knowledge of the soul of the universe? For the soul of the universe is, according to our definition, God. So, line 92 now. It is therefore very natural that Adam, that is to say, the mind, when he was giving names to and displaying his comprehension of the other animals, did not give a name to himself because he was ignorant of himself and of his own nature. Let me read it again. And it is therefore very natural that Adam, that is to say, the mind. So we're talking about here, was Adam figurative or literal? Because you read in Genesis about Adam's descendants and Adam having a long genealogy records, right? He had a Genesis. Does that mean that he was a literal person because a storyteller was telling a story about Adam? Because once again, according to Josephus, let's read. Neither could the legislator himself have a right mind without such contemplation, nor would anything he should write tend to the promotion of virtue in his readers. Unless they be taught first of all that God is the Father and Lord of all things. Did we not read that in the story of Adam and Eve? Yes. And sees all things. Can we see something similar to that in the book of Adam and Eve? The story of Adam and Eve? Yes. And that thence he bestows a happy life upon those that follow him. Can we not see that in the story of Adam and Eve? Yes. But plunges so as that do not walk in the paths of virtue into inevitable miseries. When they ate from the knowledge of the knowledge of life of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil, did they not get cursed? Did they not get put into inevitable miseries? Did they not get banished? Of course. So everything that Moses was trying to teach Israel, could we not find in the camp? Now, when Moses was desirous to teach this lesson to his countrymen, he persuaded them by raising their minds upwards to regard God. So now we see that Adam, that is to say, the mind. What was Moses trying to do? But raising their minds upwards to regard God. So what did Moses do? He gave them a fictitious character, right? He gave them, he went back into the story of creation that was going around in the time period that he lived, that was found in all kind of ancient civilizations, not just Egypt. He went back to something that they understood, and he used that same story. He put his twist to it. He used that same story to use an allegorical means of telling them that their minds need to be uplifted to the Most High. So he used their mind and gave that mind a name called Adam. And that mind that he named Adam had to practice virtue in order to stay in the garden. And when it went against the commandment of the Most High, it left out of the garden, out of the presence of the Most High, into death. That mind who Moses called Adam. Not a literal person that's walking around that had sex with a woman and produced kids. Okay, let's stop that. Okay, full of preterists. Don't forget that. We prove everything we say. So now, let's keep going, because that might not do it for you, right? That might not do it for you. And you can see this death that was going on. Let me hit the death real fast also. We can go into line 105. Accordingly, God says, in the day which you eat of it, you shall die to death. And yet, though they have eaten of it, they not only not die to death, but even begat children and are the causes of life to other beings beside themselves. Then, what then are we to say? Surely the death is of two kinds. So, first death, second death. In the book of Revelations, you read about the second death, and etc. The one being the death of the man, the other the peculiar death of the soul. Now the death of man is the separation of his soul from his body, but the death of the soul is the destruction of virtue and the omission of vice. So what was Moses trying to do? He was trying to teach them. See, you got to understand this. In the first century, they used this word virtue a lot. So let's read it. Unless this is Josephus. Unless they be taught, first of all, that God is the Father and Lord of all things and sees all things, and that thence he bestows a happy life upon those that follow him, but plunges such as that do not walk in the paths of virtue into inevitable miseries. Now, when Moses was desirous to teach this lesson to his countrymen, he did not begin with the establishment of his laws after the same manner that other legislators did. He started with a story first, and he worked up to the laws. But now, let's keep going on. What then are we to say? But death of the soul is the destruction of virtue and the admission of vice. Moses was trying to keep them in virtue. So he was going to be known, going out of that virtue is the destruction of the soul. And consequently, God calls them not merely to die, but to die to death, showing that he is speaking not of coming death, but of their peculiar and a special death, which is the death of the soul, buried in its passions and all kinds of evil. And we may also say that one kind of death is opposed to the other kind, right? And let's keep reading. For one is the separation of which is previously existent in combination, namely of body and soul. But this other death is on the contrary in the combination of them both. The inferior one, the body having the predominance, and the superior one, the soul being made subject to it. When therefore God says to die to death, you must remark that he is speaking of that death which is inflicted as punishment, and not that which exists by the original ordinance of nature. So that people were supposed to die from the beginning. Everything was supposed to die from the beginning. That's not the death that Moses is talking about. Moses is talking about another type of death, which is the death of the soul. The natural death is the one by which the soul is separated from the body. But the one which is inflicted as punishment is when the soul dies according to the life of virtue and lives only according to the life of vice. So when Moses was bringing out was that the people who live only to please themselves, who only live for self pleasure, their soul had died. So they was going to have the punishment of not being in relationship with the Most High. So now, let's keep going on. Let's go to allegorical interpretations. 2. So now, and I'm almost done. Let's keep going though. 38, and then we're going to see how this goes on with the New Testament. What up, boss? We're going to see how this goes on with the New Testament. Page 38. But it is not, line 4. But it is not good for any man to be alone. For there are 2 kinds of men. The one man, hold on. Give me 1 sec, y'all. Now, but it is not good for any man to be alone. For there are 2 kinds of men. The one man according to the image of God, the other fashioned out of the earth. For it longs for its own likeness. For the image of God is the antitype of all other things. And every imitation aims at this of which is an imitation, and is placed in the same class with it. And it is not good for either the man who was made according to the image of God to be alone, nor is there any more desirable for the factitious man to be alone. And indeed it is impossible. For the external senses and the passions and the vices and innumerable other things are combined with and adapted to the mind of this man. So we still are working with the mind, right? To the mind of this man. But the second kind of man has a helpmeet for him, who in the first place is created. For I will make him, says God, a helpmeet for him. And the second place is the younger than the object to be helped. For first of all, God created the mind, right? Now listen to what's going on here. For God created the mind. So remember he said one was created before the other. The man was created before the helpmeet. So now he's giving you the interpretation of the allegory. God created the mind, and subsequently he prepares to make its helper. But all this is spoken allegorically, in accordance with the principles of natural philosophy. What did Josephus say about Moses? Our legislators speak some things wisely, but enigmatically, and other things under a decent allegory. So now, but all of this is spoken allegorically, in accordance with the principle of natural philosophy. For external sensation and the passions of the soul are all younger than the soul, and how they would help it we shall see hereafter. But at present we will consider the fact of there being helpers younger than the object helped. So now, we see that when woman was brought up, what happened? This is an allegory for what's going on in the mind. But once we go to page 40, right, I'm going to read 19 through 23. This is going to help out even more. And God cast a deep trance upon Adam. Remember, Adam is the mind. And God cast a deep trance upon Adam and sent him to sleep. And he took one of his ribs, and so on. The literal statement conveyed in these words is a fabulous one. For how can anyone believe that a woman was made of a rib of a man, or in short, that any human being was made out of another? And what hindered God, as he had made man out of the earth, from making woman in the same manner? For the Creator was the same, and the material was almost interminable, from which was every distinctive quality whatever was made. And why, when there were so many parts of a man, did not God make the woman out of some other part rather than one of his ribs? Again, of which rib did he make her? And this question would hold even if we were to say that he had only spoken of 2 ribs. But the truth, he had not specified their number. What is it then, that the right rib or the left rib? Again, if he filled the place of the other with flesh, was not the other one which he left out also made of flesh? And indeed, our ribs are like sisters, and akin in all of their parts, or akin in all their parts, and they consist of flesh. What then are we to say? Ordinary custom calls the ribs the strength of a man. For as we say the man has ribs, which is equivalent to saying that he has vigor. And we say that a wrestler is a man with strong ribs when we mean to express that he is strong. And we say that a harp player has ribs instead of saying that he has energy and the power in his singing. Now that this has been premised, one must also say that the mind once again, that the mind, while naked and free from entanglement of the body, for our present discussion is about the mind, while it is yet entangled in nothing. So we haven't left the mind yet. You see the word Adam, we're talking about the mind, has many powers, namely the possessive power, the progenitive power, the power of soul, the power of reason, the power of comprehension, the power of others, innumerable both in their genus and species. Now the possessive power is common to that within other inanimate things, with stocks and stones, and is here shared by the things in us, which are like stones, namely by our bones, and natural powder extends over plants. And there are parts in us which have some resemblance to plants, namely our nails and our hair. And nature, I guess I'm going to finish it. And nature is a habit already put in motion. But the soul is a habit which is taken in itself, in addition, imagination and impetuosity. And this is power also, and this power also is possessed by man in common with irrational animals. And our mind has something analogous, I don't know what that is, analogous to the soul of an irrational animal. Again, the power of comprehension is a peculiar property of the mind. So we're still talking about the mind here. And the reasoning power is perhaps common to the more divine natures, but it is especially the property of the mortal nature of man. And this is a twofold power, one kind being that in accordance with that which is rational creatures partaking of mind, and the other kind being that faculty which we converse. So now we see that he's saying that this real being taken out is pretty much different aspect of the mind, right? It's about a mind being free from the understanding of the body, right? Or something like that. The mind being free. So let's go to 35 now, right? He took one of his ribs. He took the one of the many powers of the minds. So him taking the ribs is actually him taking one of the powers of the mind, namely that power which dwell in the outward senses. And when he used the expression he took, we are not to understand it if he said he took away, but rather as equivalent to he counted. He examined, as he says in another place, take the chief of the spoils into captivity. What then is it which he wishes to show? Sensation is the spoken of in a twofold manner. The one kind being according to habit, which exists even when we are asleep, and the other being according to energy. Now is the former kind one and another habit. So now, I'm going to skip around so we can get to the scriptures now. Okay, so 38, and he filled that space with flesh instead. That is to say, he filled it up with the external senses, which exists according to the habit, leading it to energy and extending it as far as the flesh. So we have him filling the space back up is him putting eternal senses back inside of man, right? And 40, and he brought her to Adam, and Adam said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." God leads the external sense existing according to energy to the mind, knowing that its motions and apprehension must turn back to the mind. But the mind, perceiving the power which it previously had, and which, while it is existing according to the habit and the state of tranquility, now have to become a complete operation in energy and to be a state of motion, marvels it and its other, in other words, like the ability to maintain understanding in things. And 44, and she shall be called woman. This is equivalent to saying, on this account, the outward sensation shall be called woman, because it is derived from the man who sets it in motion. So we see right here that woman, that who y'all call Eve, she represented outward sensation. She represented outward sensation. How which is derived from a man who sets it in motion. He says she. Why then is the expression she used? Why? Because there is also another kind of outward sensation, not derived from the mind, but having been created at the same moment with it. So you see right there that the woman was actually a representation of outward sensation. Eve wasn't a literal person. It was an allegory for what was going on in the mind, dealing with outward sensations, right? I'm going to start at 49. And on this account, a man will leave his father and his mother and will cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. On account of the external sensation, the mind, when it has been enslaved to it, shall leave both its father, the God of the universe, and the mother of all things, namely the virtue and wisdom of God, aka the Holy Spirit, and cleave to and become united to the external sensations, and it is dissolved into external sensation, so that the two become one flesh and one passion. And here you must observe that it is not the woman who cleaves to the man, but on the contrary, the man who cleaves to the woman. That is to say, the mind cleaves to the external sensations. So you see that this is all about the mind. Eve, she was about a sensation of the mind. Adam represented the mind in whole, okay? Once again, this is all a figurative language that represented something else. Once again, what did Josephus say? Some things wisely. Our legislator, who was Moses, speaks some things wisely, but enigmatically, and some under a decent allegory. So we're reading what the allegories mean. 53, and they were both naked, both Adam and his wife, and they were not ashamed. But the serpent was the most subtle of all the beasts on the earth, which the Lord God had made. The mind is naked, which is clothed neither with vice nor with virtue, which is really stripped of both, just as the soul of an infant child, which has no share in either virtue or vice, is stripped of all its coverings, and is completely naked. For these things are the coverings of the soul, by which it is enveloped and concealed, good being the garment of the virtuous soul, and evil the robe of the wicked soul. So you see the garments inside of the New Testament. When they was clothed in white garments, you understand that good, that meant goodness. That means their soul was enrobed with goodness, okay? And those spotted robes was evil or wicked soul, right? And you go to 71, the serpent is the most subtle. You go to 74, and pleasure had been represented under the form of the serpent. For this reason, as the motion of the serpent is full of many windings and varied, so is also the motion of pleasure. So, we have finally finna reach the climax, right? So, and I think we are done with it. Yes, we have went everywhere we needed to go. So that was Philo, first century Jew. Josephus, first century Jew. And they was all concentrated on the mind. They used the word Adam as a pronoun for an allegory for the different state of mankind's mind. And what Adam did when he started in the garden, it was mankind under the guise of the Spirit doing what the Most High wanted them to do. And when they went over into their own vice, Adam was kicked out of the garden, which represented mankind started being selfish and worrying about their own selfish desires instead of what the Most High wanted. So now, if that's not true, right? If Adam was really a person, and if what Josephus, Philo, and what these people is saying is untrue, then let's see if the scriptures, because don't forget, Philo was saying that Moses was concentrating on the mind, the mentality of the people, right? He was concentrating on the mind only and trying to get their mind right. And Josephus said the same thing. Moses was trying to get the mind of the people set on virtue. He was trying to teach them of God and how to please the Father and etc. So he was using allegorical information in order to teach them the patterns of the Most High so they would comprehend and get their minds right. So now, let's see if we can find that same thing inside of Scripture. Because according to the Jews outside of the Gospels and stuff, Moses and all them was concentrating on the mind. So now let's venture off into scriptures now. This is what everybody's been waiting on, because I know people, but all this outside of the Bible. And let's go into the inspired. Let's go into the inspired stuff. Well, let's go into the epistles first. Let's go into the epistles, okay? Let's start off in 1 Corinthians. And let's see what's said in 1 Corinthians. Let's see if everything was concentrating on the mind. 1 Corinthians 16. I want to start at 42. And maybe that's not right. Sorry, 1 Corinthians 15. I want to start at 42, right? And I'm going to read down to 53. So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body which is sown in corruption is raised in incorruption. And we done already seen that this is actually talking about the mind, right? This is talking about the mind being set on heavenly things instead of earthly things. The mind being set on the Father instead of what's going on in everyday life. But let's see here. It is sown in dishonor and it's raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown in the natural body, it is raised in the spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. So we even have two Adams here, right? If Adam is literal, we literally have two Adams here in the epistle. We got the first Adam, the living being. We got the second Adam, the living spirit. And that's the same thing the Father was saying. There was two different Adams. We had one Adam that was barren on the things worried about what was going on the earth, and we had another type of Adam that was worried about the things that was going on in heaven. So it's the same understanding. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterwards the spiritual. And what happened according to Philo, right? The first man was a natural minded until the spirit of life got breathed into him, and then he became a life spirit, a living spirit, or a spirit that was set upon the mind of the Most High. So the spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterwards the spiritual. The first man was of earth, made of dust. The second man is the Lord from heaven. So now Paul is giving a more clearer understanding. Okay, let's see here. Let's keep reading. As was man of dust, so also are those who are made of dust. And as the heavenly man, so also is those who are heavenly. And as we have been born the image of the man of dust, we should also bear the image of the heavenly man. And then we done already learned from Philo that image of the heavenly God was a person who had their minds set on complete virtue, on the virtue that the Most High bestowed upon mankind. So now, Let's keep going on, just in case that didn't do it for you. Once again, we're supposed to be showing you that they was worried about the mind. So now, let's read Romans 12. I'm going to read 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that which is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So now we got Paul in the epistles telling them in Rome, renew your mind. What happened in Genesis? Adam. What did he represent? The mind. What did the mind do? It left the virtue of heaven, started worrying about earthly stuff. So now, when the Holy Spirit is introduced in the New Testament, what is the message that Paul is giving out? It's time for you guys to renew your mind. Renew, become that second Adam, who has the image of the Father, who has virtue. Renew your mind. Well, that might not be enough for you. Let's go to Ephesians. Ephesians 4. Let's read 22 through 24. Let's start at 20. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct. So the things that you was normally doing, put it off. The old man, which grows corrupt according to this deceitful lust inwardly, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. So we got it right there again. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that you put on the new man, the new Adam, the new mind. You get a new mind, you become a new man, which was created according to God. You're back in the garden. The new mind, you are being created. You are a new creation. You are a new Adam. Your mind has been renewed in true righteousness and holiness, aka virtue. You see what they was teaching? The mind. They was all about getting the mind straight. They wasn't cared about genealogy. Okay? They wasn't cared about the posterity of Adam. Because we know that names meant things in Hebrews. And they was using those names as characteristics in order to teach a story that was supposed to raise the people's mind up to the Father. It wasn't meant for the Gentiles to use as literal in order to say that this man existed and these are his people, these are his people, that's not what it was about. It was about different ways to uplift their minds to the Most High, to renew their mind. Let's keep going though. Let's keep going. Let's go to Colossians, right? I always had it. Colossians always did it to me. Let's see if I can. Give me 1 second. Colossians, one of those books that hides. Thought it was around here. It's only like, there you go, Colossians. Let's start at 1. I'm going to read 21 and 22. It says, and you who once was alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now he has reconciled in the body of his flesh through death, to present you holy and blameless and above reproach in his sight. So now, where were they enemies at? And you who once were alienated. Why were they alienated? Why were they away? And enemies in your mind by wicked works. Enemies in your mind by wicked works. Let's go to Colossians. I'm going to read Colossians 3. I'm going to read 1 through 3 and 8 through 10. If then ye were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. Is that not what was going on? Ain't that what Philo actually explained? Well, for you people, Philo wasn't a Christian, so he can't understand. What? That don't make any sense. He understood Torah. Paul and them taught Torah. I mean, what are you talking about? They understood the same information. The only thing was, Philo, he wasn't concentrating on who the Messiah was. He wasn't concentrating on the new covenant. What Philo did, he sat down and wrote a book only about the Torah. Nobody said, Philo, well, tell me what you think about the prophets. Tell me what you think about this new covenant. Tell me what you think about the Messiah. No, Philo wasn't doing that. He was concentrating on the Torah. Josephus was concentrating on the Torah and the Tanakh. And he was concentrating on the things that was happening in the first century, dealing with the war. He wasn't going around trying to create, only concentrate on the new covenant like the disciples and all of them was. He wasn't trying to worry about the transitioning into the new covenant. So quit trying to say, well, we can't use them. No, what are you talking about? This is ancient information. How would you know the mindset if you don't go to the people that lived during the time? But anyway, let's keep going. So we have Paul, who's a philosopher who people don't want to believe. Paul, the philosopher, what is he telling them to do? Set their minds on things above. He keeps telling them to change their perspective, to change their mind, to renew their mind, to become a new creation, a new creature. So set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So you have it right there. And we're going to read 8 through 10, right? But now yourselves are put off of all these. So now, where did they put... let me just read all the things. Let me read all the way down to 10. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth. He's not telling them to commit suicide and kill themselves. But listen to what he's doing. Put to death your members which are on the earth. Now he's going to explain those members on the earth, what they are to put to death. Now listen to how many things are going to be based off of something inwardly, something in their mind. Listen to the things they had to put to death. Fornication, mentally. Uncleanliness, mentally. Passion, mentally. Evil desire, mentally. Covetousness, mentally, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. What things? Because their mind was corrupt, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off all these: anger, mentally; wrath, mentally, then physically; malice, mentally; blaspheming, mentally; filthy language, mentally, out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, mentally, since you have put off the old man with his deeds. So you see the old man that they was pulling off. Amen, my brother. You got to raise your consciousness. This is what they was talking about. The old man that you put off was something mentally. Okay? The old man, the new man that they was transforming was something that was going on mentally. That's what they was worried about. Their mental. Not Adam's posterity. They was worried about the mental. Adam meant mind. And have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge. Where does knowledge come from? Mental. Knowledge is something that you know and understand. It's something that happens inside here. They was put on the new man, who was renewed in knowledge, according to the image of him who created him. So what the image, if you was going to be according to the heavenly image, what did you have to have? A renewed mind in knowledge. But let's keep going on, just in case that's not enough for you. You can find it all in the book of Enoch. Enoch talked all about the wisdom coming around and people having a new shining. And check my work on the shining. Also, it goes into detail about it. But now, let's look at 1 Peter. Let's look at 1 Peter. And then we're going to come back to Hebrew. Let's look at 1 Peter 1. 1 Peter 1. And we're going to go start at 10 and go down to 15. 1 Peter 1, 10. Of this salvation the prophets have inquired and searched carefully, whose prophesied the grace that would come to you, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ, who was in them, was indicating when he testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow, pretty much found in Isaiah and etc. To them that it was revealed, that not to themselves but to us. So Peter was saying all of the things that the prophets and all of them was prophesying was happening in his generation on them. They were ministering the things which now have been reported to you through those who have preached the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things which angels desire to look into. Therefore, Gird up the loins of your mind. Do what? Gird up the, hey, how you doing, Queen? Gird up the loins, and so I wasn't able to tag anyone. Facebook wasn't allowing me to tag. But anyway, therefore, gird up the loins of your mind. Be sober, and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lust, as in your ignorance. So what is he telling them? You can't have the same mindset and be in Christ. You have a new mind. If you want to see Christ and acknowledge Christ and know Christ as your Savior, you had to change your mind and you become a new creature. You start doing things differently. You no longer want to do the things of the world. You want to do the things of Christ. That's all he's saying. As your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy with all of your conduct. Because it is written, be holy for I am holy, right? So then you got 1 Peter 4. You can read 1 and 2 and 6. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. So you can see that throughout all of the New Testament, they was telling them to change their mind. Don't do the things of the old. No more lust. This was the gospel. No more lust. No more arrogance. No more any of that stuff. Be a new creature. Be loving. Help people, not hurtful to people. Change your mind, and once you change your mind, once you start being helpful instead of harmful, you put on the image of the Father. You become a kingdom citizen. Okay? So now, let's go to 6. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to the men in the flesh, but live according to the God in the spirit. Right? And I'm going to read 2 more verses, and then I'm going to end it. And then you can go in the book of Jubilees. See, I have more stuff to show you that book of Jubilees used the story of Adam and Eve as a way to teach the law. To say the law was from the beginning. Those Jews that lived in the first century that created the book of Jubilees, even they used Adam and Eve a different way. They went a different way than what Moses did in order to teach the law, a continuation of the law since the beginning of time. But once again, what was it all to show? That the story of Adam and Eve wasn't to be taken literal. That's why people kept doing that's why the Jews kept doing all kind of things with it. You can see that in the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, Jasher, the 12 page, all of them. They show different aspects of Adam and Eve because they wasn't meant to be taken literal, so you could do pretty much anything with those type of stories because those stories had deeper meanings. So you can put any face value on it that you wanted to. But we have here that follow explain that Adam actually represented the mind. So let's go to Psalms 18, and I want to read this. Psalms 18 and 8. The law of the Lord is blameless, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, making the children wise. So you see, the law of the Lord was to convert the soul, right? Those that listen to the law of the Lord were supposed to have a conversion inside the soul. So now, let's see if I can find this real fast. Okay, let's see if I can find this real fast. Let me try to speed this up. Since we're talking about just the law real fast and how it converts the soul, right? So we need to know how actually does the law of the Lord convert the soul. So let's see if we can find it here. Let's go to Romans 13. Romans 13, 8 and 10. 8 through 10. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there be any other commandments, are all summed up in this saying: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to the neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So, the law of the Lord converts the soul. Why? Because if you do the law, and if you do it how it was meant to be done, this is before the new covenant, everybody. If you did the law how it was meant to be done, you would be in love. You will be displaying love. And love was a different mode that people of the time had. So them doing the law was them actually showing love, which was a conversion of the soul of the people in that time, who by default was evil and wicked. So if they went into the law of the Most High, then they converted their whole mentality, became a new creation, became a new type of person, which was a converted soul. And just in case, we can go to James real fast, and I want to end up in Hebrews also. I'm going to end it in Hebrews. Just let me hit the James 2 and 8 real fast. And I'm going to end it in Hebrews. Now, I guess I could have went to, sorry about this, y'all. I could have went to 1 John 2, but 1 John, but I'm not. So James 2 and 8. If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. But if you show partiality, which in the partiality of loving your neighbor, you commit sin and are convicted of the law as transgressors. So they was worried about the love, the conversion of the soul, the putting on the new man, and etc., which was a renewing of the mind. So now we're going to end it in Hebrews, right? On the point, what was going on with the law, right, and the sacrifices, and why the law was hurting mankind. Hebrews 10, let's start at 1. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of those things, can never with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered. For the worshippers, once purified, would have had no more consciousness of sins. But in those sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. So what was going on? When they was doing the law of Moses, etc., their consciousness could never be clear, because each time they did a sacrifice year by year, it was reminded in their conscience that they were sinful. And if you have a sinful conscience, you could not be partaker of the kingdom, because your mind had not been renewed yet. See, they was looking for a renewed mind, right? A mind that's where sin did not exist, a mind full of virtue. That's what they was looking for. So I am done. I went into my Orthodox study Bible, my Josephus, my Philo. So to wrap it all up, we see now, without a shadow of a doubt, that Moses was using allegorical and enigmatic language in order to explain to Israel that the Father loved everybody. But first they had to be taught of the Father. And the only way that they could be taught of the Father was the only way that Moses knew how, which was use his education that he had learned from all of these areas and put it in story form that had allegorical meanings in which the Israelites could eventually understand, to change the way that they treated each other and the way that they looked at the Father. And that was the point of the Bible anyway. Love the Father above all, believe on Christ, who taught loving the Father above all, and to love your neighbors as the disciples, as Christ loved the disciples. So that was the point of the Bible anyway. But we see that Adam actually represented the mind. So no, Adam wasn't a literal character. He was a fictitious character. No, Adam wasn't a literal character that did things that could be considered parabolic. That's not what it was said. It was saying that Adam himself was a representation of the mind, which means Adam was parabolical. Eve was parabolical. All of these things actually represented different aspects of the mind and how mankind strayed away from the Most High, and the ending result or the ending goal was for us to go back into the Most High. So through RPK, full of preterists, I think this account has been closed when we go into the ancients and not into the Gentile Christians, or not into our own understanding, to see that Adam was a figurative character, not a literal character. So thank you all for listening in. This is Elvin Israel from RPK. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell so you can get all of the upcoming and the newest videos that we publish and post. All praises to the Most High through Christ. Also, you can go to the Assembly of Sound Doctrine, AOSD, CHANDLER. You can go into that channel to get some of the older and different understandings of the Bible, as well as this other literature that y'all consider non-canonical, and those breakdowns, so you can see how it actually works and how it actually is a part of what we bring out in RPK. So thank you all for listening in. Y'all have a blessed day. Shalom to everybody. Love you all, and we will talk to you later. All right.